The trailer for Inside Out 2 dropped recently, and it looks like the movie is bringing back one of the coolest parts of the original film. The sequel is set to release in 2024 and will feature some familiar faces, as well as some new ones. In the first movie, we saw Riley dealing with a lot of changes as she moved to a new city and started growing up. The movie showed us how the different emotions inside her head, joy, sadness, anger, fear, and disgust, work together to help her navigate all these changes. But now, as Riley enters her teenage years, things are getting even more complicated. Her emotions are getting all mixed up and she's feeling all sorts of new things. And according to the trailer, some new emotions are moving in and shaking things up in headquarters. So it looks like the sequel will be exploring all the ups and downs that come with being a teenager, and how our emotions help us navigate these tricky years. The new movie will show the original emotions from Inside Out going head-to-head with some newbies: anxiety, envy, ennui, and embarrassment. They're all fighting over what's best for Riley and how to handle all the new feelings she's experiencing. But the trailer also shows us that the movie won't just be focused on what's happening inside Riley's head. We'll get to see how she's dealing with all these changes in the real world and how her parents are helping her through it all. This is actually something that wasn't explored as much in the first movie, so it's cool to see that the sequel is bringing it back and giving us a more well-rounded look at Riley's life. The trailer for Inside Out 2 gave us a sneak peek at the return of the adult emotions from the first movie. In one scene, we see Riley's mom come into her daughter's room and comment on how she hasn't packed for their trip yet. This sets Riley off and we get a glimpse into her mom's mind and the emotions that are swirling around in there. We see her version of anger say something like, "Oh boy, this is just a taste of what the next 10 years are going to be like," while the other emotions look on in shock. It's a funny moment, but it also gives us a hint at what's to come in the movie. It seems like we'll be exploring how the grown-ups in Riley's life are dealing with their own emotions and how they're trying to help her through all the changes she's going through. I think it's cool that the movie is showing us both sides of the story: what's happening inside Riley's head and what's happening in the world around her. And it'll be interesting to see how the adult emotions play into all of this. The original Inside Out movie gave us a brief look at the emotions of the adults in Riley's life, including her parents and teacher. But we didn't get to spend a lot of time exploring their minds, which was a bit of a bummer because it would have been really interesting to see how their emotions compared to those of a preteen like Riley. Luckily, it looks like Inside Out 2 is going to fix that. The cast includes the return of the adult emotions, and hopefully, the sequel will dive deeper into their minds and show us more of what's going on in there. I'm especially curious to see how the emotions of Riley's parents might have changed since the first movie. After all, they've had to deal with their daughter growing up and going through all the challenges that come with being a teenager. It'll be interesting to see how their emotions have evolved and adapted to these new experiences. Even though the first Inside Out movie didn't give us a lot of time with the grown-up emotions, it makes total sense for them to have bigger roles in the sequel. Inside Out 2 is all about Riley becoming a teenager and dealing with all the complicated emotions that come with it. And since her parents have already gone through that change from childhood to adulthood, their emotions can provide some valuable insight into what's happening in Riley's mind. By including the adult emotions in the story, Inside Out 2 can show us how the feelings of a young teenager compare to those of mature adults. The experienced emotions can offer some perspective on what's happening inside Riley's head and maybe even offer some guidance to the emotions that are still trying to figure things out. Some might say that the new emotions we'll see in Inside Out 2, anxiety, envy, ennui, and embarrassment, are actually grown-up emotions. But based on what we've seen in the trailer, it looks like they're still pretty new and undeveloped in Riley's mind. And that makes sense, because these emotions are something that we all deal with throughout our lives, but we get better at managing them as we get older and more mature. So, while the sequel will definitely give us a closer look at the standard emotions of Riley's parents, joy, sadness, anger, fear, and disgust, it might also show us how they've learned to handle the more complex emotions like anxiety, envy, ennui, and embarrassment. I think it would be really interesting to see how the adults' emotions have evolved and how they've learned to balance all these different feelings. It could offer some valuable insight for Riley and the audience on how to navigate the emotional ups and downs of growing up. And it could also lead to some funny and relatable moments, like when the adult emotions try to give advice to their teenage counterparts. From the Inside Out 2 trailer, we got a quick glimpse into the mind of Riley's mom and saw the return of her fear, joy, sadness, anger, and disgust emotions. So we know for sure that these 5 grown-up emotions will be making an appearance in the movie. But it's possible that we'll see other characters in Riley's mom's mind, and maybe even her dad's too. As we've mentioned before, the new emotions that Riley is dealing with, anxiety, envy, ennui, and embarrassment, aren't just limited to teenagers. Adults experience them too, but they've had more practice managing and controlling them. So it would be really interesting if the movie showed us how the adult versions of these emotions differ from the teenage ones that Maya Hawke and Ayo Edebiri will be voicing. By including both the teenage and adult emotions, Inside Out 2 could offer a more nuanced look at how our feelings evolve and change as we grow up. It could also add some depth to the story by showing how the adults in Riley's life are dealing with their own emotional challenges while trying to support her through hers.